Welcome to a longer session of drawing today. My name is Bobby, and today's lesson slash session is a full-length, unedited sketch that I have done drawing a dimorphodon. Now, when I was a kid, I used to be obsessed with dinosaurs, and even though pterosaurs aren't considered dinosaurs, it's pretty much all grouped into the same category. But I like birds. I like monstrous birds. So any of the ancient flying beasts, I'm pretty obsessed with. So anyway, what are we doing today? You can see here that I've started the dimorphodon sketch. Now, to answer a couple questions that I know is going to come up, all right, that I know will come up. One, I'm actually drawing with a Tombow 4B pencil today. Now, typically I sketch with 4B from Faber-Castell, but I wanted to experiment, and I have to say I was overall pretty happy with this sketch. In the feeling of this particular pencil, I don't remember the last time I used it, but just to let you all know, it doesn't really matter what tool you're using as long as you're not going into the lower H's. The reason I say that is because like 1H, 2H, 3H, it's basically built for folks with a heavy hand and they have trouble drawing lightly. What you want to try to do, and it's the first thing with challenging yourself as an artist, is getting good with just one pencil. Because when you start sketching and you get good with hand pressure, if you can sketch lightly, you can sketch with medium value, and you can get darker all with that same pencil, which is why I like using the B's. You're going to have a much more satisfactory piece of art, mainly because it's going to be more unified. The lower H's, we're not talking about the single H or the HB, just like 1H, 2H, 3H, those. The graphite is very hard, and no matter how hard you press to try to get the darker areas, it actually starts to look shiny and it picks up reflections from the lighting that you have within the room or wherever you are. So you want to try to avoid that. Here I'm sketching on moleskin paper. I just bought this pad not too long ago. I love moleskin. That's the other thing. It doesn't really matter what paper you use as long as the paper is not too toothy. If it's very rough, you're going to have a very hard time with smooth shading, period. You're going to want to use your finger to smudge because the paper itself has so many canyons and divots in it that it just doesn't pick up anything. So in my humble opinion, stick with the smoother paper. Talking moleskin for one. If you have a little extra bucks and you want to go, spend the extra money, you have Strathmore, you have Kansan, and you have newsprint. Okay, newsprint's a beautiful type of paper because we used to use that back in the day to draw cars and product design products, and it's a great paper for scribbling and experimenting with different pencils. All right, so without further ado, if you've been listening to me and watching me draw this, you can see my process. Now, I wanted to keep this process as raw as possible. I didn't speed up the drawing. I just have a simple lighting setup on this. So I have a Torgem light. I actually bought two of these. I didn't need the other one. I guess I got overzealous. But I have that one single lighting on my sketchbook, and I'm using Canon. And just keeping it simple, folks. So those artists out there watching this and listening to this, if you're wondering about how to set all of this up and maybe to have a studio of your own where you can record your process, simpler is better, or simple is better. You don't want to overdo any kind of artistic setup. Now, the one thing that you can do is purchase good lighting. Good lighting means everything. I admit I've been wrong from time to time on my lighting, but I also listen to my fans, I listen to my subscribers, my listeners, my supporters, everybody. And, you never know where good ideas are going to come from, good critiques. And I've had so many people tell me, you need to switch the lighting. So I do read the comments, folks, and I am listening. Good and bad comments, yes. Okay, the dimorphodon. Now, I was debating whether or not to choose between a couple flying, I'm just going to call them flying reptiles, but it was the dimorphodon, Rhamphorhynchus, pterodactyl. I've drawn the pteranodon so many times. And then the Quetzalcoatlus. So I just chose the dimorphodon just because of the massive jagged teeth. Now, when it comes to using reference, I did use reference for this. However, I only used pictures of the skeletal system for a dimorphodon, not anybody else's 3D model or artwork. And I have a reasoning behind that. If you're a creature designer and you want to get better at designing creatures and you want to get better at knowing what the underlying structure is, it's best to study the skeletal system and the musculature and then form your own shapes and your own opinions on top of that. There is some universal paleontology going on here where the consensus for muscles and everything are pretty much the same throughout. Okay, like where the muscles attach on a dinosaur, what bone, what joint, etc. But when it comes to skulls, I like to focus on the faces, especially the eyeballs. You can see that I'm putting a lot of detail near the eye here. And I'm going to keep going back to that as I progress through this sketch. But for the skeletal system and looking at the skull of the dimorphodon, because my sketchbook was laying on the desk, and then just to my right was my computer screen. And I had two skulls up. I didn't show most of the skeleton. I didn't want to do the full body, just the head right now. But I was looking at the different shapes of the skull, where the sinus cavity was, where the nose could be. I add the nose later on. And then my interpretation of what I think the feather / hair, or whatever you want to call it, could grow out of. That's one of the beautiful things about not knowing. We're all obsessed with trying to be perfect and knowing exactly what's happening, but we didn't live during the dinosaur era. We didn't live to see these huge pterosaurs flying overhead. All we have is the scientific evidence to show that feathers did grow on certain dinosaurs. Did it grow on the dimorphodon? Nobody knows. Maybe it did. I mean, the freaking thing flew, for crying out loud, so maybe they did have some feathers. It's not an Archaeopteryx, but it's in the same family. Okay, so here the actual skull was playing a huge part in how thick to make certain hinges on this jaw. I knew that the upper was much, much thicker than the lower jaw, which is why the lower jaw has, less than half of the muscle mass that the top jaw has. Okay, there's a lot of stuff going on with the top of that head, which is one of the reasons why it's so intriguing. I think it was always the shape that really inspired me about the dimorphodon, and also the eye placement. Whenever I sketch creatures, as I've said before, I do focus on the eyes because there's a lot of emotion there, a lot of personality, and a lot of weight when it comes to how you, as the viewer, connect with your creatures and characters. So if you're drawing along with me right now, which I hope you are, I really encourage you drawing along with me. Please know that if you feel like you lack the ability to put emotion and conviction in the facial features of your characters and creatures, just study the eyes. A lot of times we tend to accidentally draw lifeless eyes. Or, I've seen this a lot, and I've also been guilty of this. Your characters are looking off into random places without looking like they're thinking. What that means is, for example, if you're drawing a warrior, female, male, doesn't matter. Make it seem like they're thinking about what to do next. Is there a battle about to take place? If you're drawing a creature, is it about to bite something? Is it about to eat something? Is it curious? Is it protecting its young? Is it studying its surroundings? Just having a squinted eye goes a long way. Now, there are some more difficult scenarios where, for example, if you're drawing the eye of a squid or a shark or even this dimorphodon where it's kind of long. I put myself in this position, by the way, because I don't give this thing any eyelids. I don't give it eyebrows. Nobody knew if they had those. So it kind of cuts off 90% of the emotions and facial expressions that we probably could give a creature. And I'm not anthropomorphizing. Is that a word? Anthropomorphizing this creature either. It's going to have no human abilities or looks. But what I am doing is I'm focusing around the eye. I do put aging wrinkles in there, and I do indicate some iris, but not too much. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so you want to focus on the eye section. At least that's what I do. The other thing that I'm doing here is my head's going back and forth with really studying the skull of the dimorphodon. When you feel like you need to outline a certain place, look at the outline of my actual drawing. So that's how I started. I'm not going too dark with this because it's not a good idea to go too dark with this. Instead, you want to lightly place in outlines in areas where you are confident that you're going to be shading later. Okay. Now, I was sketching for more than an hour, and I did not use an eraser one single time. And you're going to see it because it's all happening real time. My opinions about an eraser are quite polarizing with a lot of the art community because on one hand, people love the fact that you can go through an entire drawing without using an eraser because it's freeing. On the flip side to that, artists believe that you can use the eraser as a tool. Yes, it is true, it could be a tool. However, think about the context in which you're using the tool. If you want to use the eraser to put a highlight in, that means you didn't draw the highlight correctly because, if you think about it, the paper itself is the highlight. Just don't shade there. So it's a matter of control versus a matter of the excuse of using the eraser. Not only that, erasers will ruin the coating of your paper. They destroy it, mainly because the coating of this paper is meant to stay down so that I can hold the sketch, hold the graphite or whatever you're using for it. So even though erasers might seem like they're a good tool, try your best to stay away from using them. In my humble opinion, I feel like you're going to become a better artist and a better decision maker if you stay away from that. And then the other thing that I want to mention, this is a little bit more acceptable, the blending stick. Okay, now this is another controversial topic that I like talking to or about, and that is the use of a blending stick. There are some instances where blending sticks work beautifully, just absolutely gorgeous, and it just depends really on the tool that you're using. If you're sketching with graphite and it doesn't exceed a 6B or a 7B, because then you're getting into very soft graphite and almost charcoal territory then. Don't use the blending stick unless you absolutely have to. This is where the ability to shade and to layer and the ability to achieve depth comes into play. So think about the two things that I said. Keeping the eraser away and not using the blending stick. What are the alternatives? Using the paper as the highlight and shading better. So can you kind of see what's happening now? You're using tools to try to substitute for something that you didn't do with the pencil. Now, it's easier said than done, of course. So if it makes you feel more comfortable to try to put highlights in there with an eraser or try to blend a little bit more on maybe an edge or a section of your drawing that doesn't quite look right, hey, you might actually achieve some good results. Kudos to you. Okay, but try your best to aim to not use those until you completely taper off of it. And then it's almost going to be like you feel sober when you're drawing instead of needing a stimulant. Maybe I need to go get caffeine now, honestly, because maybe I need that. But anyway, you can see up here, hopefully that helped you. You can see up here that I'm adding in shading to sections where I'm happy with the area that's outlined, and then I slowly but surely and methodically start to layer in different directions. Now, if you want the bare minimum of number of directions that you should take, it's 3. But if you obsess about drawings like I do and are never satisfied with the smoothness of the area, go 6, go 7, go 8. Even 9 passes. Who's going to tell you that you're wrong? Nobody. As long as it looks good and you achieve the result that you wanted to achieve, you'll be fine. And here I'm moving the pencil back and forth. Another thing that I want to address is, yes, my hand is actually off of the page when I'm shading that. But having a brand new lengthy pencil gives me the luxury of that. Please, those of you drawing right now, if your pencil has been worn down to 1.5 to 2 inches, what are you doing? Put that garbage down, go get a brand new pencil, and you're going to feel like a new person when you sketch. So please, sharpen the pencil, get a new pencil, and then sharpen it. And then you're going to feel much better about it. I can actually guarantee that, because your hand is going to learn best. Your brain is going to learn best, and your arm movements, it's all going to coincide with having a nice tool. And it's like having a fresh sketchbook. It just feels better in your hand. Sketchbook feels better knowing that you have all of this paper to experiment on. So you want to set yourself up psychologically to having good artwork, because, and I'll not trying to get all philosophical on you guys, but just set yourself up for success, folks. Okay, you don't want to stress about this kind of stuff. Drawing is supposed to be therapeutic. And if you really love the process of drawing, then you're going to love, and this is going to sound weird, you're actually going to love the mistakes that you make, because it gives you an opportunity to overcome that. When I was sketching, the structure and everything around the bones for the dimorphodon here, I thought I made a big mistake, because I started thinking through my head, oh no, am I following the new paleontology rules of like lips, beaks, feathers? Did I give enough indication that the spacing between the teeth matches the skull that I put? And I had to calm myself down and be like, you know what? There were probably millions and millions of dimorphodons at one time on planet Earth. Not all of their bone structures were the exact same. So I had to just shut myself up and just enjoy the process. All right, so you can see my layering effect here is very subtle, and this is where patience comes in. So if you find yourself being an impatient person, I hate to say this, you're going to struggle as an artist. Okay, because impatience keeps you from learning the subtleties, the baby steps, in order to build up those baby steps to form a breakthrough. Remember that. You're not going to have a breakthrough as an artist until you collect small little tidbits here and there, and tips and tricks, compile them, and then all of a sudden, when you compile them together, then it forms something new that you've never done before. And when it comes to layering and shading, it opens up a whole new plethora of artistic freedom when you draw. So let me explain. When I filled the entire head for the very first pass of value, I made sure that I went in multiple directions and had a smooth coating or a smooth layering effect. Because now what I can do is I can go back on the side of this face here and use controlled short oval shapes. And then when I'm done going in one direction, I'll turn my page or slightly alter the direction of my hand or arm, and then I'll just keep layering it until it's very smooth. Now, you can see the advantage of using smooth paper versus rough paper. I'm going in a different direction now. If you have rough paper right now, let's say that's the only type of paper that you have, you're going to need to go in probably twice as many, if not 3 times as many directions as I would on smooth paper, or anybody would on smooth paper, because the graphite is not filling the tiny grooves of the paper as easily. So here I'm very carefully not pressing hard. The reason I'm getting dark in that tiny little corner is because that's a groove in the skull underneath the skin. So you want to show indications of what that skull could look like if the skin is and muscles are stretched over it. Here we go again with layering. Now eventually these teeth are going to be darker. It's just my own interpretation. Nobody knows the the darkness or lightness of dinosaur teeth when they were actually in the mouth. But I'm going to darken them up specifically for value purposes. What I'm doing here is I'm creating contrast at every single point on this skull, or this face, I should say. So the teeth are going to be darker, the outlines. Now look behind those teeth. You can see the faint indication of teeth on the other side of the mouth. Those are ultimately going to be lighter. Now we have the darker teeth and then the lighter teeth, and they're going to play off of one another. So here I'm just connecting that part of the mouth. And you'll see that this is one of the other beautiful things about just not caring as much and just loving the drawing process. The faint outline that I gave for the entire head, every single thing. Notice how my pencil is going back and forth rapidly, and it goes outside of the line. That's okay, because then I treat it as atmospheric perspective. I treat it as atmosphere. You want your drawings to feel like they belong inside of an environment versus being slapped on a 2D surface. Is it easier said than done? Of course it is. But you're going to slowly realize, or quickly realize, I guess I could say, I can't even talk today. That's a blooper. The power of valuing. All right. So I'm going back to this corner of the head. It's probably my favorite part of the entire drawing. Mainly because the eye's there. There's a lot of things happening. There's going to be some skin wrinkles. There's the membrane in between the top and bottom jaw. You got the tongue coming out. You got the decision making of what's going to be darker inside the mouth versus the tongue itself. Shading around the eye. How much is going to be wrinkles? Like all of that. So my brain is going crazy right now trying to piece together the areas. So if you're liking today's session, comment below. Tell me what you're working on. I love doing these longer sketch sessions. And speaking of these longer sessions, so today is about an hour and 12 minutes. I'm going to have some that are 2.5 hours. I'm going to have some that are 4 or 5 hours. And then the king of all drawings, I'm going to have some that's probably 10 to 12 hours. Will I be speaking for 10 to 12 hours? That is yet to be determined. I don't know if you want to hear life stories during a 12-hour sketch, but it's going to happen at some point. I try to give everybody some tips about the industry, about drawing here and there. I don't want to be just a boring YouTube drawing channel where it's only instruction and that's it. because I am a teacher at heart too. I've taught at universities in person, multiple universities. I've taught high school. I've taught online. I've talked firsthand to students that went to college for 4 years for fine art, and they're still not good. They still don't have a job. The degree did absolutely nothing for them. And I try to dish out honesty. I try to explain what's really going on behind closed doors when it comes to art schools, and are they worth it? See, now I'm going down a rabbit hole here, so I might talk about that in another video. Comment below if you want me to talk about that, because I sure as heck would love to. I went to school, folks, so I can say stuff, both good and bad. But ultimately, I loved it. I think the experience is wonderful, so I don't want you to get discouraged if you're listening to this right now. But anyway, back to the dimorphodon. Okay, see what I'm doing here. The tooth gets an outline, but the value inside that tooth is almost equal to the outline. So now it won't seem cartoony because, cartooniness and those types of sketches, they're outlined mostly. If you want to take the cartoon feel away, stop outlining your work, and then the problem's almost instantly fixed. Okay, but anyway, the lines that I'm drawing now, where I'm working on the outside of those teeth, I'm knowing how hard to press because I'm confident about the shape never having to change again. Instead, I'm just going to play the values off of one another around these teeth. So for example, the inside of the upper palate of the mouth is going to be lighter than the darker teeth. Because if I want to get darker than those teeth, it's basically going to have to be black on the roof of the mouth, and I don't want that to happen. Remember, this is where atmosphere comes in. This is also where experience comes in, guys. Think about a creature opening its mouth and sharp teeth coming out. All right. Not all the teeth are going to be hit with the same light. Some are going to be lighter, some are going to be darker. This entire row of teeth right here, I'm looking at the dimorphodon skull on my computer screen, and I can clearly see that there is spacing in between 4 or 5 teeth towards the back of the mouth before you get to the big suckers in the front. So I'm also trying to give it some personality too, maybe some twists of the teeth. But you can see that I'm adding value to the sharp teeth in the front, and then after I do that, I shade behind it in the upper palate of the inside of the mouth. This is really important for depth, everybody, because these types of areas in your drawings, they're going to make or break whether or not you have depth at all. One of the biggest mistakes that artists make is that the shading is everything. Well, the shading is the same everywhere. There's no change in value. All right. Now, this is why I don't agree with using an entire pencil set on a sketch. Can you achieve beautiful results? Of course you can. But that's with already knowing how to draw. And if you already know how to draw, you don't need multiple pencils. So I feel like if you just simplify your process, learn how to press harder, learn how to release pressure when you're both doing regular line work, but also shading, you're going to have much more realistic results. You could see I had a mistake going on there. See that little line that I drew right up there on the nasal cavity? I didn't mean to do that. I don't know how that happened. I think I almost dropped my pencil completely. But here's where the layering comes in. This is so much fun. The layering will come in when you're happy with the area underneath the layering. So this is why you lay that foundation of graphite, the multiple passes. Remember what we did at the beginning of the sketch? I laid it down across the entire head. And now all the values that I'm putting on now and the details and everything, it's blending right in with that. So it feels like real skin. And I just jump from place to place. There we go. See that little outline that I'm giving the lip, or if you want to call it a lip? I'm using tiny little circles. They're almost, it's too hard to, well, that's not too hard to say it, but it's hard to see that my pencil's actually moving in oval motions on some of those areas. There I go in the inside of the mouth, making sure that that shading is lighter than the darker teeth. Even though I'm going to be shading in the sharp teeth on the other side. Do you see that? There we go. And I'm barely going to touch it after this. I just want to make sure it looks like a tooth, and then I move on to the next one. I'm pretty happy with it. You got to work smarter, not harder. Okay, the other thing that I want to mention. Hand placement. Look at my hand right now. I'm keeping the palm off of my drawing. It might be touching a little bit of it. Now my palm right there, it's touching a part of the neck where there's no real detail and it's not dark. My pinky finger and my ring finger, it's actually never touching my drawing. I have it slightly above it, maybe a couple millimeters above it, like right there. The palm is helping stabilize my hand. So if you guys have trouble smearing your work, it could be that you're just erasing too much and you're trying to wipe the eraser shavings away. That's a big no-no. Two, you just got sweaty hands. So keep your hands away from your drawing as much as possible. Okay, now I'm going back up the edges of the head because I want to give in a slight indication of a core shadow. Now, when it comes to appendages, when it comes to tentacles and teeth, toes, fingers, tails, with me, I like shading darker at the ends of those, mainly because it gives the illusion that it is a finished area. And it just lets me know that I've been there. Because when I'm jumping from place to place on these sketches, I kind of don't remember where I go sometimes. So I want to be careful with that. Okay, so the bottom jaw is a really important section. The lighting on the bottom jaw is going to have to stay the same for the top jaw. However, there's not a lot of areas where I can put shadows in from muscles because the muscles on these jaws are very, very thin. They're lean. Okay, they're not big and bulky like a T-Rex skull or whatever. You see how I'm getting deeper with the values right inside that mouth. There's no teeth in there, however. When I get this dark, I'm happy with that area and I will not need to add anything again. The values are starting to show some form now. Subtle. It's about subtleties, folks. Another tip for artists, if you have a muscle popping out, don't outline the muscle on top of shading. That's a bad choice. Bad choice. You see that line that I gave the little mouth slit right there? Look at the circular motions I'm using with my shading. I'm blending the line in with the rest of the skin instead of the line staying there as a line. Unless it's a wrinkle, it's not going to work. So if you are drawing a very muscular figure or a muscular creature, don't have a nice coating of shading everywhere and then just draw an outline for where a big shape is because it's going to look cartoony and it's going to take away from the realism that you'll be able to keep. So this area in the back is going to need a lot of love, mainly because the jaw hinge is there. The eye socket's there. And most of the play on different values is there. You got the eye itself, you got the tongue, you got the inside of the mouth, you got the inevitable wrinkles coming up behind the jaw, on the neck. Like it's a big, important area. So you can see that jaw that I'm shading right now, it's probably on number 5 or 6 in passes for shading. And I believe I go over it 3 or 4 more times, so I may hit it a dozen times. Right here, I'm just indicating where some wrinkles could be. See, and I'm just jumping from place to place. I'm working really hard in keeping my hands off of that. The angle that here's the other thing. The angle that I'm using the pencil in right now It's an angle that's comfortable for me. Everybody that draws, everybody listening right now, you all have a comfortable position that your arm sits in to help you form the best lines possible. You want to try to utilize that no matter what you're drawing. This slight 45-degree angle that I use with my arm moving as such helps me produce the best shading that I possibly can. It's just comfortable for me. So a lot of times I'll turn my sketchbook so I can have my arms stay at that same angle. Now here, it also comes with training too, just years of training and you getting comfortable. I'm turning it again. This way, I don't want to have a super crazy outline for the jaw, so I'm putting in some shadows at the bottom where a core shadow could exist. And I also want to show roundness. I want to show that there is muscle under there. There's skin. There's whatever else is under there. Yes, bone too, because you have to show that the muscle is attached to the bone. I cannot talk today. I want to say so much because I get so excited on this stuff, and I have to shut myself up sometimes and slow down. Circular motions again. Circular motions really help small areas to be shaded, not big ones, small ones. It's hard to go back and forth rapidly with just straight lines in a small area. So you can see I'm very careful as to how I place in this value. These front sharp teeth on the bottom jaw, those are darker than on the other side of the mouth. Again, it's a play on values. Comment below if this is helping you. Also, I just want to give a little shout out to all the Discord members, and I want to give a shout out to the channel members. Your tip jar is helping me collect pencils, purchase pencils just like the one I'm using. So thank you all. It goes a long way. And it also helps me purchase pencils for my boys that absolutely love drawing. I got a 5-year-old that just draws like nobody's business. And I got a 7-year-old that is so smart, he just picks up art like crazy. So it's a lot of fun watching them doodle. All right, there we go. Check the links in the description below for our Creature Design Workshop Discord. It's not just for creatures. It's ultimately a place in a community where like-minded individuals can come to learn how to become a better artist, a better designer, show your work, start your sketch thread, go through that journey of becoming the artist that you want to be. This is why I do this YouTube channel. I do this YouTube channel just because I love drawing and I love showing you all how you can achieve this level. I've been drawing for 41 years. And I'm still obsessed with it today like I was when I was 4 years old. I'll never forget that. In the 80s, I'm 44, folks. I'll be 45 this year. I remember being 4 years old, 1984. And my cousin had blue printer paper in her closet. And every day after school, I would come home from kindergarten, whatever. I would just start doodling on it. Monsters, just monsters. And I knew what I wanted to be. So I had that luxury of already knowing, but I had to stick with it though. So if you guys are just starting your journey out, and let's say you're later in life, let's say you're in your even 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s, it's never too late to become an artist. This is supposed to be therapeutic, so the process is what's enjoyable. And then the better you get at the process, good artwork comes as a byproduct. But just enjoy the process first. Now the layering's happening. I got to be really careful that I don't accidentally smear the back of the skull, because my hand was really close to the top of that head. Sometimes you can't help but touch the drawing with the palm of your hand. You can't. But if you can help it, avoid that at all costs. We're about 40 minutes into this almost, and I still have not used an eraser, and this is the power of it. not using the eraser causes you to become a better decision maker with your pencil strokes. Will you mess up? Yes. Do I mess up still? Of course I do. Do I use an eraser? Yes, I do. It's not a horrible tool. I just try to stay away from it. All right, now I'm jumping back to the teeth. At this point, this is where artists want to get to immediately when they sketch. And what we have to remind ourselves is that when we start off these drawings that we know is going to have a lot of detail, we have to build up to that point instead of just leaping right to that point, or else the actual detail won't look as good. Far, far, far worse than you probably could imagine. Small little circular strokes for shading that I'm doing here are good for small areas to shade. Now, there are obviously the bigger drawing techniques where you're moving more of your arm to cover a wider area to shade, but everybody has that comfortable angle and that comfortable spot to put those subtle shadings in there. Now see how I leap down there to these teeth. I'm going back and forth. I see the top teeth and then I look at the bottom and I go, okay, well, I have to darken those. Now I got to go back up to the top and darken that. You see the palm of my hand up here, how it lightly touches my drawing. I make sure that if I have to do that, I'm not moving my palm back and forth. That's what smears the graphite. Now I haven't put any black Prismacolor down, which is wax-based, and black Prismacolor is something that I've been using for years, and what that does is that the wax mixes in with the graphite. You can interchange the two, and then the wax keeps the graphite down from smearing. But if you find yourself having to put your hand over top of your graphite, it's okay, as long as your hand isn't wet. Okay, as long as it's not sweaty and you're not moving it back and forth, it shouldn't smear it all too much. And I will go back to say, it kind of does depend on the paper. So if you want smooth drawings, buy smooth paper. If you want rough drawings, buy rough paper. It's really that simple. Now you can have smooth looking drawings on rough paper, but that's 100% skill based. So you got to learn the subtleties of hand pressure or pencil pressure and such. So I wanted to make sure that this isn't just a boring dimorphodon drawing. So stripes, again, we don't know what dinosaurs really looked like. We have indications of scales and what the scales were shaped like, but nothing as far as exotic coloring and skin tone, what have you. But here I really have to think about how I'm placing these stripes in, because stripes on a creature that you're designing, it's totally a vanity metric. You don't have to put stripes down. But just be careful if you do. Now see how I didn't overdo that? I started off using stripes on that bottom jaw, and then I'm like, nope, I don't want to go any farther into that. Instead, as I was drawing the stripes, I saw an opportunity to put more on top of the head, like feathers and hair and stuff. And that's what I'm getting this area ready for. So you can see that the top of the head up there, I'm actually going outside of the edge. It's fuzzy looking. That's what I want. That's the effect I want. Not only for atmospheric perspective, but also there's going to be things growing out of that. So I want to make sure that those areas are a little ambiguous for now, and then it's going to give me the opportunity to grow some really cool quills and hair, feathers, whatever you want to call them, out of that skin. Did they grow out of the dimorphodon at that spot? Nobody knows. This is specifically why I'm using reference from a skull, so I'm not influenced by somebody else's artwork based on the dimorphodon. Okay, all I want to do is look at the bones, and then I want to plan accordingly based on the bone structure to give a unique take on it. So those of you out there that are wanting to be a better creature designer, do that with animal skulls as well. Go on Google, Bing, Pinterest, Tumblr, whatever. and start downloading high-resolution images of skulls from animals that you think are awesome. Any skull you want, rodents, elephants, doesn't matter. And start thinking about, well, how would the skin grow over top of this eye socket? Or when you look at a hippopotamus skull, I mean, if you were visiting Earth from the first time from another dimension or another planet and you saw the skull of a hippo, you probably would not even guess that the fleshed out version of a hippopotamus looks the way it does. Looks like two different animals, right? Same thing with an elephant. Skulls are crazy looking, but with skin and the trunk and everything, it looks a little different. All right, small circular motions as I'm slowly but surely building up the layer of values right around the bone shapes underneath the skin, because these are what you call bony landmarks. And bony landmarks are important if you want to make your creatures believable. It doesn't have to be just on the face. You have to give the believability and the illusion that there is structure underneath the things that you're drawing, instead of just making up random lumps where muscles are because you're too lazy to go look online at the thousands of images at your disposal for bone structure and muscles. Other than insects, it's difficult to find anatomical drawings for those. You're going to find a lot of different mammalian, reptilian, amphibian, winged, subterranean animals and their bone structures and their muscles too. Sorry about that side tangent. I felt compelled to tell you. See this outline I'm giving? It's very subtle, very rough. But what I end up doing is I bleed that roughed up outline into the rest of the tone of the jaw so that it's not too cartoony. You want to stay away from the cartoon. And here I'm just observing my drawing. Sometimes I'll take little breaks and I'll just look at it and go, is this working? Take a step back from your drawings, everyone. If you're drawing with me right now, we're about 47, 48 minutes into this. Take a look at your drawing and ask yourself, what's happening? Am I achieving what I set out to achieve? And also ask yourself if you're falling into the same habit that you normally do. Now, hopefully, by watching me draw this, maybe you're picking up some new techniques on how to use the pencil. If you're sketching with a ballpoint pen right now, I commend you for one. But two, you can achieve roughly the same type of drawing with a ballpoint. You just have to be way more careful and more subtle because, the ink comes down and those strokes are very finite. I mean, the lines for the ink. So you have to shade even closer together. Oh, I want to point something out here. You see what I did down there? See the little bumps that I'm adding to the throat? That was not planned. The very first time that I went over that line, when I was shading that, I accidentally put like a little extra graphite coming out of that area. Go ahead and rewatch that part, and then I'm like, well, how am I going to improvise? So I just started adding little sharp parts, maybe little spikes coming off similar to the neck of a lizard, and it worked. So now I'm putting in atmosphere, I'm putting in depth. We're at the point in the drawing now where depth really comes in handy. Do you see that area where there's the tongue coming out of the throat, the actual throat, the membrane, two jaws meeting, black teeth, and the eye? All of that happening at once, yet you can distinguish each individual part. It's because I paid attention to layering up the values and making sure that what's happening with one value, it's contrasting with the value next to it. The eye socket has deeper shadows. You can see the skull shape surrounding the eye socket. And you can see the skull shape running through the entire head of the dimorphodon. That's the power of having underlying bone structure to your sketches when it comes to creatures and characters. the human face, same way. Cheekbones, chin, nose, brow ridge, forehead slant, all of that. Here I'm touching base with the stripes again, and I love doing stripes. It just takes a while to get to this point. Stripes, again, are vanity metrics. You should not add stripes until you are happy with whatever type of skin that you have sketched out already. Because I know for a fact that I'm going to have to be very careful towards the top of the snout, all the way down to the teeth. I'm not even sure how many stripes I want to put in at this point. But what I do know is I want to match the subtlety of the stripes on the bottom jaw. So I don't want to go overboard. Notice, and this is a common mistake, is if you're putting stripes on your creature, make sure that the actual stripes are following the contours of your creature's body. The shadow that I'm putting in right now is deeply inset in the face. You can see it. So I have to make sure that if I'm putting stripes in that, the stripe actually follows that contour. I'm turning the sketchbook again just to make sure that I draw in the most comfortable angle. The parts where the quills and the fur and the hair together are all growing out of each other, that shading is going to be very ambiguous. There's going to be no definitive line to the head there, and that is strategic. I don't need to show that off because that's not the selling point for the creature. To me, this creature has two selling points, those teeth and that eyeball. That's why those two areas are the darkest. Everything else is slightly lighter. Minus the tongue, but the tongue is subtle. It's not a very big tongue. I didn't make it snake-like. It's more bird-like than anything. So this is an opportunity to give me a slight core shadow on top of that head there. And now I see an opportunity to put in darker stripes right around that eye socket. But I don't want to take away the feeling that you get when looking at that eye. It's nature, everybody. Nature can be merciless. Nature can be vicious. And I keep going back to the squid, the different kind of fish that you see, and I mean, especially the shark. The shark, when you look at the eyes of a shark, it's merciless and it doesn't care who you are or what you are. It just wants to eat and it just wants to swim. And then when it's done, it goes and eats again. So this creature is probably, this dimorphodon is probably chilling on a rock somewhere on a cliff, maybe with some family, overlooking, I don't know, a bay or a sea, and maybe see a lot of fish down there in the water. And it probably wants to eat it. So the stripes that I'm doing now, I'm making sure that they're following the contours of the skull, because I have to think about the fat tissue happening underneath the skin too. Okay, so to get into more details about that, if you're drawing an animal and like a hippopotamus, I'm going to use a hippopotamus, but you're trying to outline all the muscle striations, hippopotamuses they're not ripped. Okay, they're not built like Jay Cutler or Ronnie Coleman or anybody. There's a lot of fat tissue, okay, and a lot of muscle. There is a lot of muscle. But for the faces of the creatures that you're designing, there's not necessarily a lot of muscle there, but you have to think about the thickness of the skin before you even get to the bone. So it doesn't need a lot of wrinkles. The skin just needs to naturally feel like it grew on top of versus being wrapped around the bones. That's why the shading almost feels softer. It feels more rounded. Okay, and this creature is also, in my opinion, probably very smooth. I don't think that this dimorphodon was a very rough-looking creature. Maybe, I don't know. But that's just how I feel about it. So I'm just gonna touch base here with the neck a little bit. I'm not gonna go crazy with this neck area. There's no point. Because that's not the selling point. That's not the focal point. What I want to do is I want to show that this creature is observing its surroundings and twisting the neck around. So I'm going to slightly indicate some skin and some wrinkles and how I apply those. Okay, I'm starting at the top. I like starting at the top from the creatures and working my way down just because it's comfortable for me to shade like that. I don't know why, it just is. Some people may be feeling a different way, but for me, I like it. I'm getting a little darker in this area because I know that it's near the eye and the core shadow still exists back there. So the lighting is hitting the back of that head differently because I know some quills and fur and everything are going to be growing off of that area. But I'm still trying to be subtle about it because I don't want to show off anything around the neck. I will indicate some wrinkles though. Let me know what you're working on and let others know what they're working on. Comment below and tell me what you love most about drawing animals and drawing creatures and just drawing in general. I always love hearing people's opinion about drawing. I'm going to keep going back to the idea that drawing it's therapeutic. It feels good to do. It's a good outlet. Everybody has their own outlet. I've mentioned this before. For me, it's a good stress reliever. If you've been working hard during the week or during the day and you just want to be able to chill and just draw cool stuff, yeah. By the way, just drawing cool stuff for a living, it is cool, but also it is work. I don't think we as creatives get enough credit for what we have to go through. Just being creative. You don't realize how many calories you have to burn just to invent something. And it doesn't have to be with drawing. It could be writing, it could be music, carpentry, anything. Just creating uses a side of your brain that burns a lot of calories. And that leads me into one of the things I want to mention is we have to take care of ourselves when we draw or when we do art. I was just, in a meeting the other day where we talk about work-life balance, and now that the weather's getting nicer out, we want to go outside. We get depressed if we're inside all day drawing and in meetings and we see the sunshine and birds and dogs out, kids playing. It's hard. So give yourself a time during the day where you can take a walk. Walking is key. When I mentor folks, I hate the word folks, maybe I should stop. When I mentor artists and people that want to be an artist, I always stress the need to take care of yourselves when you do this stuff. So one of the ways to help you is get up early, have a distinct routine of waking up. Regardless if I have my children with me or not, I get up at 5 a.m. 5 a.m. every day, sometimes 5:30. And I make sure that I set myself up for success for that day. I have my caffeine. I drink my water, get hydrated, take my vitamins. Sometimes I'll take protein before I go to the gym, but I make sure I go to the gym. A minimum of 5 days a week. That's just me. Some people are 3, some people are 4, some people are 7. Hey, whatever. Just try to go a minimum of 3. And then make sure that you plan out your day. Look at all of the different tasks that you have for clients. If you have to get a painting done, if you have to get some sketches turned in, make sure that you allot yourself time for that. By the way, the direction that I'm shading now, I was holding my pencil at the butt end of it because what it does is it helps me whip the pencil back and forth. You remember that little outline I gave that jaw earlier on? That's when I started to go back over it, but notice how that outline is very soft. It's very fuzzy. That's what you want to get. You don't want a super outlined area because it does turn out to be cartoony and unrealistic. But anyway, work-life balance. Make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. Eat right. Lay off the Hot Pockets. All right, lay off the pizza. All of it's good. I get it. I used to love the cheeseburger Hot Pockets. I don't know why. They had some good ones, though. The cheeseburgers obviously was my favorite, but the pizza ones were good. The ones where it was cheese and broccoli. Those are pretty good too. They're absolutely terrible for you, but they taste good. Lay off those. More stripes coming down. I was pretty happy with these stripes because I knew I didn't need to go overboard. Well, I didn't need to put a lot of emphasis on the stripes because the dimorphodon that I'm drawing, I didn't want a lot of stripes on there, and I didn't want a lot of quills coming off of the face either. The main selling point are the teeth and then especially the eyes. So I was pretty happy with how that turned out. Okay, let me know in the comments below too if you are struggling with work-life balance. You know, if you join our Creature Design Workshop Discord, which that link is in the description also, we have dedicated areas where you can just throw in your sketchbook, throw in the doodles for the day, and converse with other like-minded artists. It's a lot of fun. I finally put that nose in. You guys have probably been wondering when I'm going to put that nose in. I do put an ear in too. I think it works out quite well. But notice how I'm using circular motions to shade. I have so many different passes of value on this head now that any shading that I put on is carefully done. Look at my two fingers, my ring finger and my pinky finger. It looks like they're touching the bottom jaw, and you're wondering, how the heck am I not smearing it? They're not touching it. I'm being very careful. I'm using my knuckle for my pinky finger. I'm holding it above the drawing. And also the palm of my hand was helping keep most of my fingers off. I'm trying to give a little unique feel with the eye socket there. Now I start in on the wrinkles. I don't know why this is so much fun, but I love drawing wrinkles for creatures. It's just so much fun. Helps with realism, but you got to do it the right way. The right way is find out how thick that skin is, because the wrinkles are going to be different. Let me give you a little secret here. You put in more wrinkles in the places where there's joints and they need to be stretched. So the smaller the wrinkles, typically the more elastic the skin, because those are very fine wrinkles, and the skin needs to bend there at all times. Just look at hairless cats, look at lizards, and see where those wrinkles show up. That's usually a good indicator. So those of you drawing along with me now, we're hitting the home stretch. So whatever you're drawing, analyze it, and like I said before, ask yourself if there are any areas where you feel like you could put some more shading on, if there are areas where you feel like you succeeded, and try to figure out what the best course of action is next. You know, watching me draw is one thing. Maybe I'm helping you find a new way of approaching shading, approaching outlines, just approaching beginning the sketch in general. But have an open mind too. You know, we as artists are pretty stubborn folks, and we don't like to learn new things. But hopefully, along this journey that we've gone on today, that you can pick up some nuggets here and there. It'll help you it'll help you be a better artist. All right, so now we are really seeing the details come out, and all the foundation that we laid in the beginning of the sketch, this is where it pays off. But unfortunately, this is the part where people want to start too. They'll jump right into the hair, they'll jump right into the stripes and the scales, and there's no foundation for those things to actually sit on or grow from, for that matter. So we want to be very careful. We want to be strategic when figuring out what we want to draw and how we approach it. See how light these strokes are? I'm keeping them light on purpose, and that's because I don't want to draw attention to that area. All I want to do is fill it up enough so that there's believable structure there. Putting in not necessarily a core shadow, but a darker treatment where the fur would be, or feathers. and then I leave the skin the way it is. And I do put in some wrinkles later on. But I want to show you the power of this shading technique where I add fuzziness to it and kind of bring the shading off into the background. That's why I'm not obsessed about staying in the lines anywhere. All right, and I'm turning my sketchbook any way that I can in order to feel more comfortable. That's just me looking at different areas that I've already drawn and go, you know what, I'm still not happy with that. I'm never happy with the eyes that I draw. It's just the way it happens. Comment below if you're also like that. There's probably certain areas where you're never happy with. Wrinkles should be subtle. Don't start with harsh outlines for wrinkles unless it is a huge fold of skin. You don't need to show those off at all. Instead, follow the contour of the body and think about how that skin would be folding in that spot. Okay, the skin on that neck region is probably very, very soft and loose and stretchy anyway. Just like old people. You know, we have that same thing under our chins when we get super old. All right? Well, guess what? It's going to happen to everybody, and it happens to animals too. Now I'm going over the area where the neck muscles are separating from the throat. I will admit, I'm not really sure about the muscles of a dimorphodon. But what I'm doing is I'm just indicating where the thickness of the spine could be. So now there are two distinct areas, but I'm not putting too much attention to it. There's an area on the neck for the spine, and there's an area on the neck for the throat, like the trachea area. And notice how I'm using small oval/circular motions for shading where those wrinkle lines are. So I'm bringing the values into the wrinkle, and then I'm shading over the wrinkle. This helps soften the area up so that it's not too cartoony and outlined. I want to be as realistic as possible. I'm putting more shading on the bottom side of the wrinkles as it wraps around that neck, because that's what's happening with the lighting. This dinosaur is lit from above, so that I want to make sure that the ambient lighting and everything around it is subtle and carefully placed. Another thing that benefits creature designers, for skin anyway, and texturing, is seeing how wrinkles bunch up together. That's pretty tough. Wrinkles typically do not form symmetrically. Each part of your skin is different, so you want to make sure that you catch that asymmetry going on there. It also adds to the realism. It adds to the randomness of nature and evolution. There we go. Okay. So you can really see the texturing from the moleskin paper come through here. I have to go in multiple different directions to try to fill those gaps. But I also embrace a lot of those little bumps and grooves in the paper anyway, because it adds texture to the skin. And now I have to honor those little skin/spiky things going on with the throat, all because of one little miscalculation of shading earlier in the drawing. There we go, and I see an opportunity to get a little bit darker with those wrinkles and make them longer. So I run a mentorship, and I help people start drawing or get back into it after years of letting it lay dormant. Because I know everybody has those sketchbooks that are just sitting in the closets. So what you want to do, please email me at bobbyrebholz@gmail.com, and we'll have a little consultation set up where we can talk about your goals as an artist, short-term, long-term, and we can figure out the best course of action for you, and you only, because each individual person gets their own lessons and their own draw time. I record all sessions, give you a Google Drive link so that you can watch them indefinitely to help you out. All right, so now we're really getting into the details. These are finishing touches for the drawing, and I think that at this point, it's good to take a breather, sit back, and ask yourself, do I really need to add anything else, or is this sketch done? I think what one person constitutes as a finished sketch isn't to another person. I know I get a lot of feedback on my drawings. People are like, Bobby, you don't finish your drawings for your YouTube channel. My argument is, yes, I do. That's because you don't need to fill in everything in order for it to be a finished drawing. You show what you need to show, and if that goal is coming across, then you're done. All right, putting in some finishing touches here. Comment below if you found this session helpful. I normally don't ask people to like and subscribe, but in this particular instance, I will ask you if you are interested to see these longer form, no edited, super raw drawings so that you can actually see the stuff happening. Subscribe so that you can catch my later videos where I'll be drawing for multiple hours. And in culmination, the big one coming up of 10 hours. I will be drawing that. I'm not going to tell you what I'll be drawing, but it is going to be a creature, so it's going to be a lot of fun. I want to thank everybody for hanging around this long, and I hope that you picked up some vital tips along the way to be a better artist and to spark that imagination again. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you, and until next